Thank you so much for coming to see us. I imagine some of you may have come and visited us before for these talks. Has anyone in the audience been to one of these Green Britain talks before? Yay, thank you very much. Anyone here in the audience an Ecotricity customer? Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. So Ecotricity sponsors this stage in the Arboretum, which we absolutely love. And we have a vision and a mission for a green Britain, a really important aspect of our work. So as well as supplying energy and doing green energy and a lot of other things as well, all ties into our mission of a green Britain. And this morning we're having the opportunity to hear from Dale, being interviewed by Ian Collins, who actually hosts the afternoon show for TV Talk, or Talk TV, I should say. And they're both about to come on stage. This is a session where Ian will be chatting to Dale about the most current issues. I'm sure you've seen and heard Dale quite a lot recently, and you may be following the Zerocarbonista podcast that Dale actually runs. Now, this is a live Zerocarbonista podcast, which means your questions and the answers will also be included. So there'll first be a session of chat, but please hoard your questions, and we'll get to a point where Ian will then open the conversation to the audience. And we have two people from Ecotricity, two lovely girls that will have the microphones, roaming mics that we'll be able to bring to you to ask your questions. So without further ado, as everyone always says, I'd like to introduce you to, drum roll, Dale and Ian. Way!
Yeah. Good morning. And look, I mean, we might as well start with the weather, Dale, really, because it's not raining. It was raining, and then it stopped raining. Then it was a bit windy, and then it stopped being windy and became sunny.
Yeah.
And then the sun went in and it rained again. And then now the sun is back out. But literally 2 minutes ago, it wasn't. So it's almost as if there's a climate crisis going on.
Yeah. I wonder.
Well, in fact, if you look at something we talk a lot about on the podcast, obviously, is climate by definition. But the social media, of course, has opened up this whole kind of can of fairly nefarious worms of people who've got other ideas about the climate scam.
Yeah,
it's called.
It's mad.
You've got to look around the world right now. I mean, this is quite timely that we're recording this and we're here this year when lots of really rather dark records are being broken weather-wise around the world.
Yeah, I mean, we're about to have the hottest July ever, aren't we? And records just keep tumbling. I mean, in the last month or so, it's all been about the heat, hasn't it? But we're having other records of, rain, floods, droughts, all that kind of stuff. But, I was on TalkSport Radio yesterday and bumped into another one of those people you're referring to there, and somebody that basically denies there's a crisis, denies denying it, but then goes on to deny it.
Hang on, denies denying it. That's a whole new level of denial, isn't it?
That's right. It's crazy, and it's hard to know. It's hard to know how to deal with these people. I met some people in Stroud last night, actually, some very drunk people, and they were like telling me it's all a scam, and I'm being paid to talk about this climate crisis that doesn't exist. And all I could do is shake my head and say you're crazy. Because that's what I think, right? Anybody right now that says there's not a climate crisis and it's not man-made and it's not driven by fossil fuels, they have to be crazy. They have to be not looking at the news. They have to be unaware of global events.
And thank you. Was it you that said it, or I guess you did? We might come on to your appearance on Question Time a couple of weeks ago. We got a lot of comment in many different ways. Yeah. But was it you or somebody else said that people should go to jail for denying?
Oh yeah, that was me. Actually, I said it should be a crime. The example I used was the Holocaust. Right, it's illegal to deny the Holocaust. Excuse me. And what I think I said it on air somewhere actually, that it should be a crime to deny this coming Holocaust, because the climate crisis will be far worse than that one, the one that we all know about. And we've made it illegal to deny it for good reasons. Why do we allow people to deny this climate crisis or to diffuse any clear recognition of the problem, because all that does is hamper efforts to do something about it. It sows confusion. We have climate doubt around us, and what we need is clarity. We need everybody to understand and be told the same thing. It's like the BBC shouldn't give platform to climate deniers, for example. Nobody should. No radio station should either allow these people to get on the air. Thank you.
Shall we? I mean, it's worth, and I wish I'd written a list of these actually, but I think we can probably make this work. But it's denial bingo, where there's some very sort of obvious things. Shall I start off with the first one?
Yeah, do it.
What about 1976? There you go.
Oh yeah, the hot summer. Yeah, that's a classic. In that we've had hot summers before. Okay. I had our friend Julia Hartley Brewer. I heard she was in. Yeah. Well, that's funny. I know she's not really our friend, but she was in Italy.
She's over there, Dale.
She was in Italy there last week when the place was burning, around her ears. And at first she denied there was a problem. She said, "Oh, the smoke is coming from Mount Etna." And then some hours later, apparently, and then some hours later, when it was just undeniable, she was driving down the road, shot a little video, smoke everywhere, bushfires, that kind of stuff. And she said, "Oh, well, local people are used to this. Happens all the time." So that's the other thing, right? We have hot summers, bushfires happen all of the time, that kind of stuff. Honestly, it's incredible. But shoot, what's your next one?
Yeah, well, the other one, which kind of ties into what you just said, is and this comes up a lot on social media. For some reason, I don't know why, and I don't want to malign anybody in the audience here, but there's a disproportionate amount of deniers called Terry. It's just a reality, okay? I can't change that. So Terry says, I went to Mallorca 5 years ago, and it was hotter than this.
Okay, yeah.
What do you say to Terry, Dale?
That's that anecdotal approach, isn't it? My own experience, my own opinion type thing. I want to know how many Terrys we've got in the audience. Actually, I mean actual Terrys, not deniers, just Terrys.
There's three men just left at the back. So a trio of Terrys.
We ain't got no Terrys. Maybe you're right.
What do you call it?
You're right.
A collective noun for Terrys. Please don't answer that. But yeah, that is a common one that comes up. That it's been hotter before, and the other one, which I suppose we should just dovetail into this, is that, well, hang on, why is some parts of the world having this heat wave, but we're not? So in Italy and Greece and southern Europe, Spain as well, it's been in the 40s. But if you go sort of anything above Paris, for example, then they're not having one. It's 20 degrees and it's actually quite cold.
Yeah, I mean, what can you say? It's not a pattern of weather, is it? I mean, it's happening all over the place. In America, they've got the extremes in their own country. They've got floods and droughts.
Canada, for example.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm kind of speechless really when people say stupid things like that, right? I mean, you just got to look at the collective experience of the world in terms of extreme weather events, and something's wrong. But the data says something's wrong. The data is very clear, and you just you can't argue with the science. So I think we should just make it illegal.
Yeah. Okay.
China, of course, is not on the list of.
China is the other big one, isn't it? Yeah. What about China?
Yeah, which is a great one. So it's not like denial of the climate crisis. This is a deflection. This one is, what can we do about it? We're 1% of global emissions, and China is like half or something. I don't know. And if they don't change, then we can't solve this problem. And it's a great argument to put up, right? Because it's very persuasive. And I mean, there's severe logic in there, actually. If China don't change, then we can't do it. And of course, the answer to that is China are a climate superpower, actually. If you look at what they're doing, they've got to 50% green electricity on the grid. I was telling this fella on Talk Sport yesterday, because that was his last card. Like, but what about China? 50% green electricity on the grid. They've installed more solar panels than the rest of the world put together. 80% of the solar panels that we install outside of China are made in China. 98% of buses on the road in China are electric already, and they're making tens of millions of electric cars. The pace of change in China is incredible. They're 5 years ahead of their targets, while we're about 10 years behind our own targets. And quite frankly, they're a climate superpower, and we're laggards. So when somebody says to me, "What about China?" I'm like, "Well, what about China? They're doing a fantastic job, actually." And it should be, "What about Britain? What's Britain doing?"
I mean, that good point. I know there was a piece, I think it was on Radio 4 this morning, that was dealing with how well, or relatively well, Britain were doing. We were kind of going in the right direction, but seemed to have stalled. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, we've got all the right policies, targets. We signed up to the Paris Accord and all that kind of stuff. And then we got Boris Johnson for Prime Minister, didn't we? And he said all the right things and did all the wrong things. And Sunak is continuing in that vein. I think it's worse with Sunak, actually. I think he's so desperate to get elected that he's turning his back on the science and the economics of the green economy. And I think he's promoting fossil fuels in the North Sea for purely self-interested reasons, to try and get re-elected, to create a culture war, a divide in our country on this issue of the climate, about which there should be no divide and no disagreement. What he's doing flies in the face not just of the science, but also the economics, because the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, reported to him 2 weeks ago now, I think it might have been last week, and they told him it will cost twice as much to stick with fossil fuels as it will cost to transition to green energy. It will cost our economy twice as much. There's no economic argument for what he's doing in the North Sea, but there is a political one. And I think that's a terrible thing.
Do you think that Sunak, I mean, he's not going to be there for much longer, clearly, even if he took it to its longest possible time frame. They'll be out of power 18 months, 2 years. So in that time, it's unlikely they're going to start. I mean, he talks about drilling, because you're right. It's a bit like the fracking thing. I mean, I don't know where the fracking argument's gone, because we enjoyed talking about fracking. Because we had a theory, didn't we? The only reason why some people kind of on that part of the political spectrum were really into fracking was because of the word fracking. Because it sounds like fracking.
Yeah.
It sounds like, go on, frack it. It's like, it's got a hard onomatopoeic kind of sense to it. Fracking, we love it. Drill, get down there, frack till your life's over. It was that kind of sense, that real, almost evangelical belief that fracking was somehow the answer to the world's problems. And it didn't take much of a Google search to establish that even if you were loosely in favor of trying it, there was no longevity in it apart from anything else.
Well, that's right. That's one of the problems, really, with relying on fossil fuels. So the Conservatives are telling everybody now that drilling in the North Sea will lower energy bills. But it can't do that. Half of our gas comes from the North Sea now, and in the energy crisis, we pay 10 times more for it than we used to, because we allow global markets to set the price. So it doesn't matter how many fossil fuels we make here, it won't lower our energy bills. And the second thing they say is that it will give us energy security, but fossil fuels are a single-use fuel. You burn them and they're gone. In the North Sea now, the average time it takes to go looking for oil and producing it is 28 years, right, from start to producing oil. And these fields are empty within 2 decades. The ones that are being licensed now are supposed to come on stream in 4 years' time, but they'll be gone in 20 years. There's no security in that. Whereas renewable energy, of course, is a forever fuel. We invest in the infrastructure, we build it, and it's there forever. And there's no global price for electricity made from the wind and the sun. So we get to price it here. We can eradicate fuel poverty and have permanently low energy bills and proper energy security. And, by the way, fight the climate crisis.
I mean, just to go back to the point about, I think it was, God, do you remember Liz Truss? Do you remember her? She was great.
Yeah, she was.
Affectionately known to her friends as Terry. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Terry Truss. So Terry Truss said she would return to fracking in her 3 hours as Prime Minister. Are you saying that you think Rishi Sunak is playing the same kind of card? There's that sort of part of the gallery that say we want drilling for oil. It just sounds well-hard, and it sounds like it's something that we should be doing, and it's a bit Trumpy because he says that kind of thing quite a lot. But whether he'll actually do it is the point. And the smart money says that he won't, because he can't, even if he wanted to, because he won't be there long enough, and the time frame doesn't exist. Do you think Rishi Sunak actually believes it, or is he just saying it to appease that kind of part of his party?
I don't think he can believe it. I don't think he's stupid enough to be able to look at the science. Well, maybe he is, all right, but I don't think so. to be able to look at the science and the economics, I think he understands stuff. Like, was he from the world of banking or something like that? I don't know. I think he understands money at least, and all of the indicators are very clear. For every pound that we invest in renewable energy, we get twice the GDP growth that we would if we invested it in fossil fuels, and 2.5 times as many jobs. So even the unions are in the wrong place on this, because recently they've been, complaining about Labour policy and saying that they want more North Sea oil and gas drilling, and actually they want to bring back fracking because there are jobs in that. But they're wrong. They don't understand the numbers, because there are twice as many jobs, more than twice as many jobs in renewable energy and permanent jobs, forever jobs, than in fossil fuels. So I think Rishi Sunak knows what he's doing. It's a completely calculated move. It's divisive like Brexit, and green issues and the green economy have become the newest enemy in the Tories' forever culture war.
So, which brings us to your new best friend, Keir Starmer. And there's been a lot of talk about.
I know that laugh. I know who that
is. So it's quite funny because I've known you for a few years, Dale, and when I hear Keir Starmer interviewed and asked about you, I always find that kind of, wow, he's being asked about Dale. This is interesting that, from where you began, constructing a windmill all those years ago, thinking, I wonder where this will go, to what you're doing now. And here's essentially the next Prime Minister being asked about your input into them. According to the Daily Mail, and I don't care what anybody says, it is the bastion of truth, the Daily Mail. It is the only place you will find, if you really want to know what's going on in the world, you have to read the Daily. I can't even say it seriously. But according to the Daily Mail, you're essentially funding the Labour Party. You're funding Just Stop Oil. We'll come to that in a moment. But Keir Starmer's Labour Party, how will it be? And you've thrown a few quid in their direction. That's public knowledge. How will they be so significantly different to the Conservatives? Because they might be different, but it's got to be significant, hasn't it? It's got to be seismic.
Yeah, I was answering this question to the New Statesman last week, actually, and he was really kind of prodding me with his questions about what Labour will do. Was I happy with the rowing back, his words, on the 28 billion a year commitment, for example, to spend on the green economy? Was I happy with this? Was I confident in this, that, and the other? And he said, you seem very relaxed about what Labour may do when they get into power. And I said, yes, because the Tories are so fucking bad, I said, excuse my language, so fucking bad that whatever Labour do can only be a shed load better. So I'm very relaxed about it.
But if you're, I mean, I think that is probably just factually correct, yes. But it needs to be, it's no good just being a bit better, is it? Is my point. They've got to be radical.
They're going to be massively less worse, which is, I think, one thing. You know what I mean? They do believe in the green economy. I mean, I have a positive way of looking at this as well. But I mean, if you look around our country, the economy is on its knees, along with the NHS. We've got crises everywhere. The Conservatives in 13 years have dealt with nothing. They've spent 13 years infighting like ferrets in a sack over who's going to be the next leader. And the country's gone to rack and ruin, quite frankly. I think Labour will put that right. They'll run the country properly, but also they do get the green agenda. I've talked to a few of the shadow cabinet members, and I believe that they believe in it. And I've seen some of their plans, the public ones. I haven't seen anything secret. And you can see that at the heart of that is a genuine understanding of the opportunity that the green economy is. And this is an interesting thing. We for some time now, have not been arguing about the climate crisis. I mean Ecotricity, and I think Labour have started to do the same thing. We're not trying to justify green measures like green energy, electric cars, and that kind of stuff off the back of the climate crisis anymore. It's a simple economic argument. It's massively more expensive not to do this stuff, and that's a wonderful place to be. We've seen the technology become so cheap that we're in a place now where it's a simple economic argument. We get much more for our money if we spend it on green stuff than we do the old stuff, the brown stuff, fossils, and the climate becomes icing on the cake. And that's a very different way to frame the argument to the one we've been having for the last couple of decades.
Why have they not? And again, this is something that we've talked about on the podcast. In America, it's a small but perfectly formed contingent of Republicans who are Republicans for climate change or whatever it's called, who get everything you've just said, and they've worked out on the basis that whether you buy into all the finer points of every argument, the fact is, from a commercial perspective, from a jobs perspective, there's gold there in them their green hills, as they say, and they've worked out that it's you don't get a second chance at this stuff. So go for it, and it will actually be financially more beneficial in terms of jobs and the economy and pound for pound and all the rest, dollar for dollar. You would think more. Somebody like Rishi Sunak, again, say what you like about him, he's obviously not a stupid bloke. What is it that they're all missing, and why are they missing it?
Honestly, I don't know. I do think it's an attempt at a new front on the culture war for them. I think it's a desperate attempt to separate themselves from Labour at the next election. I mean, the polls are disastrous for them right now, and I think they're just desperate to try and claw some of that back by creating this super divisive issue, and with dishonesty as well, because it's dishonest to say that fossil fuels will lower our energy bills or give us energy security, or that the green transition is too expensive, which is the other thing they keep saying. We can't afford it. We have to slow it down. When the opposite is the truth. The longer we take, the more expensive it is. They know that's true. So I think it's just desperate. And, it's politics. And it's really unfortunate when the party in government will put their own interests above the interests of the country. I think there's something completely wrong about that.
In terms of Labour, one of the arguments that Labour, that the Conservatives are trying to put forward, and I mean, it's even by their own standards, I think they're making a hash and a complete mess of this. But what they're trying to say is Labour, essentially, it's old Labour. They're dominated by the unions. They're funded by Just Stop Oil, and Just Stop Oil are funded by, what's his name again? Oh, yes, Dale Vince. So you're the man behind Just Stop Oil. You're therefore the man behind the Labour Party. You're all in it together, a bunch of dodgy lefties, and that's what Rishi Sunak thinks of you.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's happening. He sent a fundraiser out a couple of weeks ago in which he named me, called me a zealot and something else. I don't know what it was. And he wrote this line, which I thought was incredible. It said, while Labour are relying on money from people like this, we rely on money from ordinary people like you. And I thought, wow, right? Whoever thought that was true? And he signed it, Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister of the UK. My favourite prod of him on social media was say he had to put his job title in there because a lot of people don't know what the fuck he does.
So ordinary people are funding the Tories, and big business are funding Labour. Right. So if you're going to tell a lie, tell a big one. So what about the Just Stop Oil thing? Because of course this has been, I mean, in terms of campaigning, forget what anybody thinks about inconvenience and the like. But if your aim is to be high profile, if your aim is to make the front pages, if your aim is to really rile the Daily Mail, it's arguably one of the most successful campaigns of recent times, if not ever, because these people have pitched up at Wimbledon. I mean, the Wimbledon thing was interesting. Well, it's just worth mentioning the Wimbledon, because everyone said, oh, yes, it's always somebody called Tarquin who went to a private school. That's usually the person. Well, the guy at Wimbledon was about 87, wasn't he? This old duffer. He ran onto the court, and there he went, and he ran around a little bit, and he didn't mind being dragged away, and nothing was violent, nothing happened. Right. But, of course, there is an argument that some people, not unreasonably put forward, that actually Just Stop Oil are crossing a line, gluing yourself to the road or stopping traffic. It's just not the way to get people on side.
Yeah, that's right. It's a very common point made in media, I would say. I've been having these discussions for at least a month on air. And it's always the same old thing. And I get to a point where I say, look, guys, you live in a media bubble, right? You're telling me that Just Stop Oil, the campaign isn't working, that the people are this particular stereotype, that they're unpopular. You're telling me all this stuff, but you don't know. You haven't been out there, right? I've been out on the streets. I joined a demo around Parliament Square, led a demo according to the Daily Mail, which is quite funny. And the backstory to that is they stuck me on the front page with this fake kind of funding story about a month ago. And rather than be kind of cowed by this right-wing kind of intense interest, I decided to go on a march around Parliament Square and do a bit of disruption, and then flick the V's to the Daily Mail, literally and metaphorically. I shot a little video of me doing it, and then we ran a funding campaign for 48 hours. I doubled everything that they could raise, and then Thank you. Then the guy that made Don't Look Up, I think it's Don't Look Up, not Just Look Up, is it? Whichever it is, Adam McKay, he did the same thing. He trebled it for another 48 hours. And between us, we raised £1 million. And I'm like, the Daily Mail did that, actually. I granted them the credit for that. And I did bump into one of their reporters, and he said to me, it doesn't matter what I print. He said, you'll use it against me and raise money. I thought brilliant.
Do you think the Daily Mail are secretly on side?
Yeah, I mean, they like news, don't they? And Just Stop Oil makes news. But this is a constant theme of the argument. Honestly, all of the time. The media, they say to me, it's not working, is it? And I say, but here we are talking about it again, right? And I did an interview with Tonight. I think it aired a couple of days ago. I haven't seen it yet. But at the end of the interview, the lady talking to me said, Climate Majority Project. It's a new project designed to give a voice to the silent majority of people. And I joined it. I signed an open letter and said it's a great idea. People that don't want to block roads, don't want to get arrested and all that kind of stuff, but need a voice. And she said it launched last week, didn't it? But I didn't see any press coverage. And she's like, "Oh, I've just made your argument for you, haven't I?" Because my argument is, the more you disrupt, the more you make the news, the more you have a channel and a platform to talk about what we actually need to talk about, which is there's a climate crisis, is driven by fossil fuels, and it's madness to drill in the North Sea.
But you've previously, I remember we did an interview on the radio what happened to Extinction Rebellion? I mean, is it kind of morphed into Just Stop Oil? Is it a separate thing? Do we know?
They're still around.
Because you didn't agree with all of their methods, did you? And I remember we had a debate between you and
Gail?
Yeah,
Gail Badbrook, yeah. Thank you.
And that was when there was a lot of that kind of window smashing going on, and in banks and tapping windows with hammers and shattering these. Yeah. You disagreed with that.
I thought it was a bad move. It's violence. It's a form of violence, for one thing, against property, not people. But it's very easy for the media to portray it, badly, in a negative light. And I just think that would do more harm than good.
Yeah,
I'm in that camp on that issue. I remember that one because she at the same time we talked about food, didn't we? Food, the cow in the room of the climate crisis. So many people get the climate crisis and want to see something done, but they eat animals. And Gail's one of those people, and I was shocked when I learned that. I'm like, how can you do that? And she argued actually that there's a role for a better kind of meat, and it's okay, we can still keep killing animals, which is a bit shocking to me.
Didn't we also discover that she drove a diesel Volvo as well? I think
I have no idea.
Possibly not the right person in the job at the time. I don't know, but there was. Just let's take up that point about food, because you're again. Sorry to keep repeating something we talk about on the podcast a lot, but you're very passionate that food is not just a kind of side point to this debate, but it's absolutely crucial to the discussion on climate.
It's the key to everything that we need to. It's one of the keys. I mean, energy, transport, and food are the three big things that we have to change. And food, the way we make it at the moment, isn't just like the second biggest cause of the climate crisis, and it's like polluting our rivers, with runoff from intensive animal agriculture and that kind of stuff. But if we were to give up eating animals and go plant-based, we'd free up 75% of all farmland. This is land that we've taken from nature. It's caused a massive decline of nature in our country. And so by changing our diets, we can take one of the biggest steps that we can take. Personally, it's probably the biggest we can all take to fight the climate crisis. We can bring wildlife back to our country and actually improve our own health as well, because most of the chronic diseases that affect us in older life are caused by eating animal products. And of course, off to the side of that, there's 1 billion animals a year in our country that are born, raised brutally and killed brutally every year for a food choice that we don't need to make. So there's an animal rights issue here as well.
And obviously, again, this is kind of, I suppose, vegan bingo, much like the previous game. But it always comes up. I had the very conversation this morning actually about choices of food. If you're a vegan, wasn't that long ago that if you were a vegetarian, you went into a restaurant, you had to say, do you have a vegetarian menu? And then somebody would go out the back and probably type one up, say salad, and come back out and go, there you go, you can have a salad if you want, thanks. But now you don't have to do that because there's lots of imaginative and really tasty vegetarian foods, and they sit there proudly on the main menu with everything else.
Mm.
But the vegan one, that's still for many people a bit tricky. But there is one food product that people don't even associate with being a vegan.
With this.
But there it is.
There it is.
Chips are vegan, everybody. Chips! The food of gods is vegan. And nobody really makes that association. Everybody loves a chip,
That's
doesn't it?
funny, isn't it? And this occurred, of course, in football, in the world of football.
Yeah.
We'd just recruited Big Dunk to be Forest Green's new head coach. This was like January time, something like that. And we were on the pitch doing an interview with Sky, and they were pressing him about all kinds of stuff. And they said to him, "Have you eaten vegan food?" And he said he didn't think he had. And to the side of him, I just said, "Chips are vegan," and he went, "Chips are vegan."
Yeah.
And that was it. The moment was born. And there we have it. Chips are vegan. I'm a big fan of chips. But you're right. It's way easier to eat without eating animals nowadays. You know, every supermarket, every cafe, every restaurant, you know, they'll all cater for that. And it's a movement. You know, it's a movement of people. And the more we educate people about the suffering of the animals, the human health impact, and the climate impact, and the choice, actually, the easiness of the choice and what it would bring back wildlife-wise in our country. I mean, there's so many reasons. It's almost too good to be true. It's a simple change. Just stop eating animals.
Will that not be? I mean, will that just ultimately take, consumer pressure until people? Because there's always the basically I'm a vegetarian. But basically I'm a vegetarian. You hear that a lot. Basically I'm a vegetarian. I do like a bacon sandwich on a Sunday though. It's like, well, you're not a vegetarian then, are you? Yeah. But that kind of, until you get to that tipping point where it's that there is, money essentially for business in being vegan.
Yeah, well, I think two things there. Firstly, the money exists and business can see that. When Greggs brought out their first vegan sausage roll, they were blown away by the response. And now they've got a whole bunch of vegan stuff and lots of people have followed suit. But on that question of, I'm a vegetarian, but I like a bacon sandwich, I think it's really important that we don't make plant-based eating, not eating animals, veganism, whatever you want to call it, we don't make it exclusive or difficult. We don't make it look like something you have to be completely in or completely out of. So if somebody says to me, I just eat a bacon sandwich on a Sunday, I'd say, well, fair play, right? Because that's making a big difference.
So, and we've discussed this before, haven't we, with all manner of initiatives, whether it's recycling or veganism. Everybody doesn't have to do everything immediately.
That's right.
If everybody did a bit, the knock-on effect, the ripple effect is absolutely huge.
That's right. It's probably one of those unspoken bingo things that puts people off doing anything. The idea that they've got to do everything or they must do nothing because something in between will be called out for hypocrisy or contradiction or just the stuff we're talking about. It's a constant theme in conversations that I have, particularly with, let's say, more prominent people like footballers, for example. They want to speak out on this issue of the climate crisis, but they're afraid the media will go for them and say, but you do this, as well as that, as well as saying that you do this, which is the classic of our right-wing media. But I think if you can just embrace the fact that we're all on a path and nobody's perfect, then just carry on and do whatever it is you can do, and just say that to people that want to criticize you for something you don't do.
Yeah, and in terms of you personally, Dale, I mean, you've had what is by any measure this incredible journey from the windmill. I mean, it's worth for those I think most people in this audience probably are aware of, kind of where you came from, but you've lived in unconventional places and you've lived life on the road, as it were. But just tell us about that windmill, how that, what was going on there. Not many, people in their younger years wake up with an epiphany to build a windmill.
Well, I was 30 by then, and I'd spent a decade on the road, living in buses and trucks, and a thing called a bender, which is like an English igloo, made of hazel poles in an igloo shape, covered in a tarpaulin that literally fell off the back of a lorry. And it was a great place to live, and a great way to live. But at the end of this decade, I had a little windmill powering my trailer, and so I understood how wind energy worked, and saw the first big windmills built in Cornwall. It was the beginning of this modern era of wind energy. And I was living on a hill in Stroud. I knew it was windy because that's how I powered myself. And I thought, well, I could spend another 10 years living like this, or I could drop in and try and build a big windmill on this hill. And that's what I did. It took me 5 years. I had to learn a lot of stuff and fight a lot of battles, and then built this first windmill Friday 13th of December, actually, 1996. And then Ecotricity kind of grew out of that. And our first mission was energy, to change the way that was made in Britain, because it was the biggest single cause of climate emissions. And in the 2000s, we went looking for the second and third and found transport and food, and found this amazing fact that energy, transport, and food together are 80% of everybody's personal carbon footprint. It's just about how we power our homes, how we travel, and what we eat. And I think that's a wonderful, simple, empowering message, because we've got more agency in this than we really think.
Should we go back to denial bingo?
Yeah, sure. What you got?
What happens when the wind doesn't blow?
Windmills don't make electricity, but the counterpoint to that is it's not very often not windy at all. There's always some wind, and modern windmills will make some electricity. And it's very rare also for there to be no wind across the entire country at the same time. It's even more rare for it to happen across an entire continent like Europe. And we are interconnected. And as we, all of us, increase the amount of green energy, including wind energy, on our grids, we will be swapping it between countries like we do now, with fossil or nuclear powered electricity that is swapped around Europe and stuff like that. So, I mean, windmills don't make electricity when there's no wind, but it's a very rare occurrence for none at all. And usually when there's no wind, there's sun. And, you know, that's the other big renewable option that we have, the wind and the sun. Excuse me. We have enough to power our country onshore, something like 10 times over. They're super cheap. They need no public money. We're building solar projects now with no support from the government at all. They're super fast. You can build them in about 12 months. And they're the cleanest form of energy that we know. And the national grid says that we can have a grid running 100% on green energy. And that's my answer to anybody that says the grid can't cope. Right? The national grid says they can.
Should we take some questions, Dale?
I
think it's a good idea. And we've done, last year we did this, and we could have probably spent the entire day here, which was
we got kicked off,
which would be amazing. So we still have about another 30 odd minutes. So it'd be nice just to get some questions. We've got a microphone roving around. We've got some hands. We'll try and get to as many people as possible. And questions to Dale.
Hi. I just want to know when electricity is going to cost less than gas.
It's a good question. And I actually don't have an answer. Gas is so cheap, it's incredible, and this is what making the decarbonisation of how we eat our homes, making it so difficult. The government have this heat pump plan, national heat pump plan, which is madness, because it will double the amount of electricity that homes use, and given that electricity is more expensive than gas, as you know, then overall heating bills for a home with a heat pump are 50% higher than with a gas boiler. And it's just madness to try to impose that on 30 million homes in Britain, when actually all we have to do is make green gas from grass and put that in the gas grid.
Okay. Another question, just down the front here.
Thank you. That was a fantastic talk. Thank you. I'm totally sold on the Green Dream. I think it's amazing. I just want to ask if you could comment on how we avoid going for greener business as usual, because we are sort of digging up a lot of minerals in the global south to create the things that we need. How do we get so that we kind of are creating a more socially just world, as well as, you know, creating really strong renewable energy, transport that's electrified and linked into the grid? How do we get more people out of private vehicles onto public transport that is truly green, accessible, electrified? How do we really go as radical as possible?
So to make it so obviously some green initiatives, there is still a price to be paid to be green, and we often hear stories of mining in electric batteries for cars and things like that, and social media is full of sort of images and stories such as that. How do we get it? How do we make it a much more pure and authentic, 100% green? Yeah, no questions.
I think there's another bingo card you could set up here, Ian. Around the cost of the switch to renewable energy, because there's a lot of things said about rare earth magnets and rare minerals and that kind of stuff, and how this is needed for windmills, for example. A lot of it's not true. The windmills we build have no rare earth magnets, for example. It's entirely possible to build them without that. And actually, the amount of rare minerals that the transition is going to take, if you look at the graphs, I've looked at this in some depth. is a fraction of what the world is using at the moment for conventional industry. So what we need for the transition is a small piece of what we're doing anyway. It's not a problem. And the other important point to make is that what we build is reusable. Electric car batteries can be reused at the end of their first life. We can use them to power the grid. And then after that, they can be recycled. Fossil fuels are a single-use fuel. And all of the stuff that we build in the green space can be reused. And first off as well, I mean, not first off, but also I just want to say electric cars have hardly any moving parts at all. We launched an airline last week, and I bumped into this incredible statistic. We launched an electric airline, and a conventional engine of the type that we're going to use will have 18,000 moving parts. These are all wear and tearing parts that have to be replaced, by more mining and that kind of stuff. The electric motor equivalent that we're going to use on our airplanes, that's 18. So that's 18 instead of 18,000 moving parts. And so the longevity of these devices that we build, cars and planes and that kind of stuff, will be incredible compared to the conventional. And there's a lot of myths about that. You mentioned social justice. I think that's really important. I don't think we can have true sustainability without social justice. And thank you. How do we get there? I think we have to have a Labour government, and I do believe they will be radical enough to do the job.
Okay. Next question, down here.
Great. Congratulations on what you've done and you continue to do. You mentioned 3 areas of food, transport, and energy, but you didn't mention waste. We are sitting here amongst an audience of believers in everything that you're doing. How do we reach more people? We in Bath run Share and Repair, where we encourage people to borrow, not buy, and mend it, don't end it. And waste is something we've all got far too much of. We consume too much. We've got too much crap in our houses. How do we stop people doing that? But also, more importantly, we have a large audience of people that we see. You have a large audience of people that subscribe to Ecotricity. How do we get those people to the next level through looking at their carbon footprint? People don't know where to start. They don't automatically go home and go on, let's measure my carbon footprint, because they don't know how to. Would you be prepared to invest in making one of those apps better so that more people can actually do more and understand how they can do more? Because we're in a climate now where everybody wants to do something. We're starting at basics with practical action to do stuff, but we can do a lot more. We haven't got the finances to do that sort of thing to get them to the next level, but you could. Would you be prepared to do that?
It's a good point on waste.
Yeah, waste is a good point. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Which has kind of been slightly sidelined of late, I suppose, because we talked, reasonable to say that a lot of the green discussion kind of began with recycling, and that was one of the first things that was debated, and it's how people got on board, and it was a bit confusing, even though people had recycled their milk bottles for years and never even thought they were recycling, but it would be curious. I mean, the idea of throwing a milk bottle away would be madness, but it was recycling, and that's kind of what perhaps got some people into this discussion, but it feels a little bit sidelined now.
Yeah. So when we talk about energy, transport, and food, and how you power yourself, travel, and eat, and that kind of stuff, we also talk the next level of detail below that is it's about using less, actually, in all categories: energy, transport, and food. Travel less, eat less. In some cases, we eat too much, and of course use less energy, and that means like turning stuff off when you're not using the stuff, and wasting less is important. They're two slightly different things: use less and waste less. Throw less away. 50% of all the food that we make is thrown away, which is an incredible waste. For example, your question, I think at the end was, would I be prepared to invest in an app that helped people measure their carbon footprint? Did I get that right?
So there
a better
must
one.
come
Yeah, I was going to say, because we made one, didn't we, Helen? We did create one. I don't know if it still lives on our website. It is thank you. It is. Yep, it's on our website, apparently. I don't know. So I didn't even know where it was. How many people use it? You out there? Yeah. Electronic devices. Yeah.
All the kind of, I mean, I had a conversation with a guy that works at my local council tip, and he used the phrase, I couldn't believe this, he used the phrase, "our regulars," and I said, "Your regulars?" you have people on the Christmas card list at the tip. And he said you wouldn't believe where people come in, they get to know the faces. And they're not people that are getting rid of their grass waste. They're people that are bringing IKEA wardrobes in that they bought 6 weeks ago and go, I don't want that anymore, chuck that in there. That mentality is still there.
Yeah, yeah. And the good thing about tips now is I haven't been to one for a while, but the people working there set aside stuff like that.
Yeah.
That can be reused, which is a great thing to do. I mean, recycling and reuse, we know it's a fundamental part of what we have to do to live a more sustainable lifestyle. There's no doubt about it. But the bigger issues are energy, transport, and food. And along the way, we can deal with waste. Electronic waste is a different issue. And the kind of culture of always wanting a new phone, for example, or a new device, and that's creating a lot of waste. But I don't have an answer to that, right? We need to consume less. It's a mindset thing. We just need to consume less.
More questions? I think we're over the middle there.
Hello. Thanks very much, Dale, for everything you're doing. And thank you for raising the issue of aviation. I'm from Bristol, and Bristol Airport's planning to expand from 10 million passengers per year to 20 million, and that's the same across the country in terms of regional airports. I'm really excited about developments in sustainable aviation fuel, but I'm also concerned that the aviation industry will jump onto this and say, "Oh, it's okay, carry on flying. It's all fine. It's all going to be sustainable." And I suppose I'm just concerned that it's not going to happen quick enough, and people will get the message that just carry on flying. It's fine. Is this something that concerns you, and how would you address that issue?
So, yeah, thanks. Look, I hear what you're saying. I see what you're saying out there in the world. Greenwashing is the thing, and a lot of industries are doing it. The aviation industry is definitely doing it, and there's an amount of it happening around fossil fuels now. The idea that we need a 3-decade-long transition or something like that of fossil fuels, which is nonsense. In the case of the airline industry, excuse me, as far as I'm concerned, sustainable aviation fuel is a bullshit concept, unless it's made using carbon from the atmosphere, which can be done. It's possible to do that. But if it's about cooking oil waste, for example, I mean, that's a joke, surely. And if it's about energy crops grown on land through intensive farming, then we know that's crazy. I read a study a few weeks ago that said just to power flights in Britain would take all of Britain's farmland to grow the crops for sustainable aviation fuel. So that isn't sustainable aviation fuel, actually. And so I think that's bullshit. I think electric planes are now possible. We launched a thing called EcoJet last week, I think it was. And we'll be in the air with electric planes in 2025. The engines are being tested now for approval by the CAA. They'll have a range to begin with of 300 miles. 18 months later, we'll have a 70-seater with a 500-mile range, which means we can fly to Europe. And the industry itself is planning to start the transition to electric in 2035 or 2040. And the reason we've done this is because it can be done at least 10 years sooner. And so we're kind of throwing down the gauntlet to the airline industry and saying, look, we can do this now. What are you waiting for? And that's a really exciting thing to do. But thank you. Electric planes can take us so far, but for long haul, we have a different problem. Unless there's an amazing breakthrough in battery technology and they become super light, then I don't think electric will get us across the Atlantic, for example. But for that, we do have the option to make fuel from the sky. We can take carbon from the atmosphere and we can turn it into a proxy for aviation fuel. One of the other things that we do at Ecotricity is we make diamonds from atmospheric carbon, and that took about 7 years of R&D. But the ability to make fuel from atmospheric carbon has existed since the Second World War.
It's the one area, isn't it, though, that plane travel, as the question obviously suggested, it's sort of taken out of the discussion almost. We talk about cars, we talk about how we heat our homes, solar panels. Even Sadiq Khan, who yesterday won the right to expand the ULEZ zone to the outer suburbs of London. One of the big arguments against him is, well, what about the airports? If you look at what's going on at Heathrow or Gatwick, these are on the outskirts of London. Mass pollution, sitting on runways, just churning out God knows what. Landing, engine still running, waiting there for an hour. the equivalent of 8,000 cars in 10 minutes. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
So how does that get such a free pass, or is it just is this part of the? Have we got to weather that particular storm, or is it just not being taken seriously?
I think it's just one of the big things that's wrong in our country, actually, that we give such a free pass to the airline industry. They pay no fuel tax at all. We give duty-free benefits to people that fly. We don't give duty-free to people that stand at a bus stop. Why is that? City Khan obviously doesn't control Heathrow. That's a national government thing. I remember Johnson said he would lay down in front of the bulldozers to stop the expansion of Heathrow, and then he dodged the vote, didn't he? He just dodged the vote. He couldn't even do that. But look, aviation is something we have to sort out, and the revolution in transport is well underway. It began with cars over 10 years ago. Buses are on the road now. Trucks are coming out of R&D. And as I argue in my book, the last piece of the puzzle was going to be electric flying. And that's coming now. We're maybe a year and a half, 2 years away from doing that, which I think is a fantastic thing. And one of the most important aspects of that for me is that it means we can say to people that actually you haven't got to give up flying to get to zero carbon. And a lot of our work is about saying to people, all of the things we like to have in life, we can still have. We just have to find another way to have them. We often talk burgers, cars, football, even diamonds, because we've worked in all of those fields. And this is an empowering message because, back to your bingo card, one of the things the right wing like to say is that we all want us to go back to living in caves. Julia Hartley-Brewer once accused me of wanting to uninvent the wheel. I couldn't believe she said it, but it's that kind of narrative that they have, that we want to live a life of denial, and it permeates to the population at large that going green is about giving stuff up, and it isn't. And so airlines or flying, for me, is the last piece of the puzzle that says it doesn't matter what it is that you like to have in your life, actually, we can find a way to do it in another way, in a better way. And then we can get millions of people on board with this, because it's not looking like people are being asked to give something up. The other thing is you mentioned smell around airports, is super important, and noise is another issue as well. So as we were writing the press release for EcoJet, I realized that actually there's a very different experience to electric flying. If you've driven an electric car, you'll know how really quiet they are. If you walk past one, you'll know how they don't smell. And so for people around the airport, in the plane, and neighbors of the airport, there will be a complete lack of the smell of burning fuel and a complete lack of noise, which would be really important other benefit to electric flying.
Next question. I think we're over there.
Morning. Thank you for the book from last year. I sat on the bus reading the chapter about Forest Green Rovers the other week, and suddenly had a thought that I would ask you about. Because the banks are funding the fossil fuel crisis, we need to move our money away from the banks.
Yeah, we do.
So I'm quite active in the divestment movement, and UK Divest have just launched a divestment in sport campaign. And all the campaigners, we're all campaigning to fight the climate crisis, but we're all doing it within lots of different groups. And I know that you're active with Forest Green Rovers, are doing those. Now they've started their sport campaign, and everyone just needs to join forces and fight the fight together. And I wondered if you knew about UK Divest's campaign, because you could get involved, and I have mentioned your activities at Forest Green Rovers to them, but could we do that somehow?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take a look. I think it's a really important issue. I heard the other week that this government are planning to make it illegal for councils to divest their pensions from fossil fuels, and that's fucking crazy. On what basis they argue that that's a good thing to do, I don't know, but it's a mad thing, because divesting from those industries isn't just a responsible, a morally responsible thing to do. Actually, it's an economically sensible thing to do, because those industries are in terminal decline.
We haven't mentioned our friend from Shell, have we?
Nah.
What was it he said? It's dangerous and irresponsible to stop drilling for oil, basically.
That's what he said, which is crazy. It's one of those counterfactual things to say, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's actually dangerous and crazy to
Indeed.
continue drilling for oil. My favorite quotes of the last couple of weeks, actually, one from the UN. Actually, they're both from the UN. Come to think of it, was to say that it's moral and economic madness to drill for new oil and gas. This is the head of the UN saying that, as Rishi Sunak appears to do exactly that, or prepares to do exactly that. And a NASA scientist last week who said that if you're alive now, this is the coldest summer you'll ever experience. Yeah. And that was a chilling quote, I thought.
Next question.
Thanks, Dale, very much. So this is a plea for action. It's weaving together two themes. One is social justice and also the climate crisis. Rishi Sunak announced last week that he's going to build 1 million new homes. How can you help us? How can we all insist that those new homes are carbon neutral and get us back to a position that we were in 2015 with legislation that was ready to be enacted, overturned by George Osborne at the result of pressure from the house builders? How can we get to building carbon neutral homes that don't need to be heated, that don't need heat pumps, that need minimal electricity? What can you do to get behind that? It's something that's ready, it's oven ready to go.
Yep. Yeah, I'm aware of it because it was a travesty when it happened, when Cameron and Osborne did that. And it was part of their sweeping away of what they called the green crap back in the day, along with banning onshore wind and shutting down the solar industry and stuff like that. I brought this up on Question Time a few weeks ago. It was an answer I gave to somebody in the audience on the same thing. It was there. It was ready. It had been developed with the housing industry. They were ready to deploy it. And then every new home for the last decade, actually by now, could have been built to that standard and needed barely any energy. It's just another crime, actually, from this government to have done that. It is a crime to have done that.
What's interesting, and we've discussed this before, the Conservative Party, so you've got Michael Gove. He's a nice guy, isn't he, Michael Gove?
Said nobody ever.
Nice. Is he a nice fellow? He likes the heat pump still. He wants heat pumps and all manner of things going on. In fact, the point I was going to make was that the right wing of the Tory party hate the Tory party because they think the Tory party are full of green nonsense and initiatives. So it's a strange divide here where you would argue the Tory party are ignoring everything, but people who used to be Tories say they've left the Tories because they're too green.
Mm. Yeah, and I'm about to write a letter to Michael Gove, actually, an open letter, because he did speak out in the news this week against the scrapping of boilers. And we've done the same with the Daily Express. We ran a Save Our Boiler campaign, which is really arguing that the heat pump program is crazy and we shouldn't do it, and that we have another way to make gas. We just need to get on with it. And there's an immense economic opportunity to make our own gas here from grass. But I won't go into that. There's a lot to say. I'm going to write to Michael Gove and say, how about drop the politics, let's meet, and let's talk about this, because I'm on the same side as you of this argument. Actually, at the moment, he's just saying we need to look again at it. So he's just like flagging a bit of skepticism. But I think the Tories realize it won't work because actually, right now, they're saying we can't impose the cost of green stuff on the electorate. That's like, the ULEZ. This is what they said off the back of their by-elections last week. But they themselves, with the banning of gas boilers, are about to impose a massive cost on homes. I think maybe they've realized that. But anyway, I'm going to try and meet him and talk to him about this and say, look, we could be on the same side on this issue at least, which is heat pumps is a crazy idea. For the nation, they work. and that, they can work in limited cases. And I have one. So I have to say that. I'm not against heat pumps. I'm against a national heat pump program. And I'm going to try and talk to him about green gas. I've sent the green gas plan that we published. We published 2 now. I've sent it to the Tories as well as the Labour and the Greens and the Lib Dems before. But so far, nobody's picked it up. I'm going to have a go at it.
Because it can't be, and we've been building houses as humans in varying forms for thousands of years. The idea that we've got to this point of the 21st century and we cannot build an environmentally fully efficient home is surely ridiculous.
Well, we can, can't we? We know we can.
Yeah,
we know we can. And I mean, everything's wrong with our housing market anyway. I mean, who can afford to buy a house? And one of the economic indicators that the media reports on all of the time is the rise in house prices, like it's a good thing.
Yeah.
The price of houses keeps going up. The economy's strong. It's a good thing. It's not a good thing. And actually, we overlook the rented sector as well. It's not about buying a house, but people that rent houses are treated incredibly badly. There's no control of private landlords worth speaking of. And, it's just all kinds of wrong. It's the kind of stuff that drove me to live on the road, actually. So I recommend that. That's a good life experience.
We could all live on the road. It'd be sort of vague carnage for a bit, but what fun we'd have.
You might clog the roads.
Other questions? Wherever the microphones are, I think we're at the back there.
It's been great. As someone who sells electricity and who absolutely wants a system that's going to run on 100% renewables, and it's got to keep working in the transition to that point. I wonder what you'd like to see happening to demand in the next 10 years, size, shape, timing, and what do you see as the policy steps that are needed for that?
So I'd say, look, the transition's well underway. We're at something like 40% green on the grid, and we've had no problems. And a lot of the concern around the transition that's recently talked up by the right wing is just fake concern. It's a reason to talk it down. The transition is natural. We've got fossil fuel power stations that will turn down as we turn up the green stuff. Again, this came up on Question Time. Guy said, how are we going to do this? We can't just turn it off overnight. The use of fossil fuels, nobody's arguing for that. So firstly, the transition's happening. We have the technology in renewable energy in the wind and sun. We need no public money for that. That was a burp. I haven't had breakfast yet. And what we need actually is just a change in the planning regime. So wind energy at the moment is unique in that it's decided by district councils, or it used to be until it was banned. When it comes back, it must come back on a more level playing field with other forms of energy generation. Otherwise, we just won't get it built at the speed that we need it. Solar power is the same, actually, in all respects, except it's not banned. And so there's no economic policy required to support speed up the transition. It's really planning policy that's at the heart of it. I don't know if many of you will remember, you probably will, when mobile phones first came in, mobile phone masts were a real planning problem. And it became such a national problem that the government simply designated them important national infrastructure, which gave them a presumption of planning. And they were in the hands of district councils. They were subject to local lobby groups, essentially, that didn't want to have a mobile phone mast near them, but they did want to use a mobile phone. And it's a little bit like that with electricity. We all want to have it. Some people don't want to live near the way that it's made. So change planning. Actually, we need to then, and if we change planning for onshore wind, this will happen. We'll go back to a decentralized form of renewable energy, because with the big offshore wind projects, it's become analogous to a really big power station, 500 megawatts, 1,000 megawatts of wind, with a huge cable ashore and a huge transformer station ashore and a queue to get on the grid of 10 to 15 years, which is incredible. But the beauty of wind energy when it first came to this country was that you could drop a windmill or a handful of windmills somewhere around the country near where the grid was and could already take it and plug straight in. It's a decentralized form of energy that works with the grid rather than having to hack into it and pump huge amounts in from one location, which also creates vulnerability, because if that one cable goes down, then you lose an awful lot of power. So I hope that we go back to that decentralized model, and I think we will if we change the planning regime to give onshore wind a fair shout. And honestly, we could do this in 10 years. From where we are now, we could get to 100% in 10 years.
I think we've got time for maybe two more questions. Wherever, I think the mic is over here.
Thank you. It's been a really interesting conversation. I just want your take on this. There's an article, I think that's on the NASA website, that says that due to the increase in CO2, there's been a greening of the planet of about equivalent of twice the area of North America. Now, we know that CO2 is the stuff of life. I mean, without CO2, plants die and then we die. What's your take on this? Because man-made climate change could be increasing the CO2 levels, which would be a net good for the greening of the planet.
Yeah, I can understand how that looks. I think there's more CO2 than we need, though. I think we can green the planet without these incredibly high levels of CO2 that are wrecking the climate. And I think actually, if the climate crisis comes along and it sweeps human life off the planet, then we will see the planet become incredibly green again, right? Because we won't be here to keep mowing and chopping things down and stuff like that. And the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere over a long period of time will balance itself back out again. But right now, I think the levels we've got are too much. We certainly don't need it to grow plants. We don't have a shortage of CO2 for that.
Well, I mean, the fact is, I would have thought it was a net good to have more plants on the planet, have better crops, etc. Because if you've got more CO2, the crops we have are going to be a hell of a lot more efficient.
Yeah, but my point is we have enough CO2. And the abundance that we have in the atmosphere now, the overabundance, is going to kill us in a very different way, is wrecking the climate, is going to make the planet uninhabitable. But we don't have a problem growing plants.
Can I give you a quote from, you're going to love this. This is from Sky News Australia. Now, I don't know if anybody is aware of Sky News Australia, but it sort of makes the Daily Mail look a bit like the Beano. Sky News Australia is right out there when it comes to questions. People like you, Dale. So this fella on there, who's, from what I can gather, just looking at social media, is a fairly sort of nightly occurrence, and this is his favourite theme. He says, CO2s make up 0.04% of the atmosphere. Humans contribute just 3% of the 0.04%. Where are the political leaders brave enough to stop this rubbish? He says. But that has had about 3.5 million people have watched that video, and if 10% take away and go, there you go, it's all rubbish.
Yeah.
How do you counter that level of information? What would be the answer to that? Because if you, on first value, if you came to this subject and didn't know anything about it and just read that, you'd go, oh, that's really interesting, I'd like to know more.
Yeah.
So we don't, according to him, I wish I could show you a picture of him. Look, there he is. See him? Lovely little fella.
Yeah, nice.
Terry, that's him, yeah. Aussie Terry. Lovely man.
Yeah, well,
but according to him, like our contribution is so minor that it's not a problem. That's basically what he's saying.
Yeah,
how do we counter
what can you say to somebody? We need a law that makes that illegal, right? We need to
illegal.
Back to that, right? Denying the climate crisis should be illegal. There are lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? That's the quote. You can selectively pick out some statistics like that and say, therefore, there's not a problem. But blimey, we know there's a problem. The data, the science is crystal clear there's a problem. How do we counter that? I agree. On social media, it's the controversial stuff that that gets the looks, isn't it? The views, that's like...
Well, I took a cursory look through the comments on that, and I had to go through about 300 till I got to one person making the point that you're making. And prior to that, everyone's going, yeah, it's a scam. It's a scam like the scandemic, and this is the next scam, and there's more scams to come. And Tel down under there is obviously heading it up.
Yeah, and the guy I spoke to on Talk Sport yesterday was the same. He was like, the pandemic taught me not to trust the people in power, he basically questioned the whole basis of the climate crisis. And, what can you say? I mean, I don't want to even hear it anymore.
We've got time, I think, for one more question, wherever the microphone has landed. We're over there. Oh, there's one more after that.
Great.
You'd struggled to find much about in the and the environment in the school curriculum, and not a lot about tackling fake news either, really. But given that young people and what they know and hear and understand is important, can't we do better?
I agree. And the government have proposed to look at this issue in 2 years' time. Not do something, just look at it. But we done something about it. We got started 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago. We created something called the Ministry of Eco-Education because we thought, we could see there's this gap in education. We started in primary schools. We worked with head teachers teachers, environment experts, and we created an entire primary school curriculum that has sustainability woven into every topic. And I think it's in use by a couple of thousand schools now. Yeah, it's 1,000 schools are using it now, and within 12 to 18 months, it'll be 5,000. It's super popular with teachers and with kids. We created a secondary school version last year, and that's been trialed by, I think, a few hundred schools now. And I think we reached 500,000 kids last time we looked at it. And it's one of the things that the right-wing press came at me for in the middle of this Just Stop Oil kind of fake story. And now he's brainwashing our children, is what they said. Which is just incredible. But anyway, we're done at Ministry of Eco Education. Anybody out there connected to a school, it's online, it's free, it's road tested, and it's here.
And there's a session tomorrow on stage.
What time? 10:30 here tomorrow.
Yeah. A live climate session here, which is for kids and younger people, adults, anyone, that wants to come along. 10:30 tomorrow.
10:30 tomorrow. Yeah, come find out more.
And I think we have one more question.
Hi, I'm part of an organisation called Lawyers Are Responsible. Behind every fossil fuel transaction, there is a lawyer making it happen, and they are earning huge amounts of money in doing so. We've made a declaration that we will refuse to provide our legal services to assist those fossil fuel transactions. And thank you. We've also declared that we will refuse our services against peaceful climate protesters when they're being prosecuted. Thank you very much. One of the main things we're doing right now is trying to target the big 5 city law firms that are making a huge amount of money from this. And I wanted to ask you for any advice you have about going into negotiations with big business to try and stop their greenwashing and actually make them transition away from giving their services to destroying the planet. And if you know any lawyers, can you ask them to come and join us?
Great question.
Yeah, definitely.
Great point.
Definitely. The Good Law Project did that, didn't they? They've declared that they won't act against climate protesters, which I think is a brilliant thing. I like what you're doing. When you said, have I any advice for going into negotiations with big business, my first thought was they'll bug you, actually, because that's my experience. In a couple of cases in negotiations with big business, the room was bugged. And they tried to get an advantage.
Oh, bugged you? Literally bugged you?
Yeah. Not just made me angry.
I think they annoyed you. Yeah.
No. But, I think in your case, it's not likely to happen. But you never know, right? It's happened to me twice for certain. And, I think in terms of getting people to stop greenwashing, I think it's a matter of time. Often people say to me, oh, look at this greenwashing, that's a bad thing. And, I actually think it's a good thing because it's a step on the path. Because before, those same businesses ignored the issue completely. Once they start greenwashing, that they know it's an issue that they have to be seen to do something about. And that's part of the progress towards actually doing something about it. So I would just encourage them to do that. Call out the bullshit, the greenwash, and point to what they can do and should do that's actual on the issue. But I see it as progress. Greenwashing is progress. It means they know we're here, they know it's an issue, and they have to do something about it.
And that pretty much concludes. We should mention the book, of course, by the way. It's not that you're here to flog books down. But,
we're here to give them away, I think.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons it's worth it, for those who don't know, this was the kind of revised version of Manifesto, which came out a couple of years ago. You added a chapter, there's a new forward and all the rest of it. And it actually became a #1 bestseller.
It did.
Sunday Times bestseller.
Sunday Times bestseller, yeah. Wow.
So there it is. It is there, and I'm sure, there's more on the stand. Where is the stand, Helen? Stand is over, over that way.
We're not doing it here, then we're doing it over there, are we? Yeah, over there, if you want a book. They're free.
In the meantime, a big thank you to Mr. Dale Vince, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Thanks, everybody. It's been a pleasure.